Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Sarah Hutchinson at yogawisdomandwellness.com, and this is a vlog about grief. So stick around if grief is a topic in your life, and if it's not, email me because I really want to know about anybody who's not grieving. Anybody who's not grieving something as dramatic as a death, or something as seemingly mundane as leaving a job, retirement even is a form of grieving. How about your nest emptying? Guess what? Those are all losses. And there's always grief involved in loss. And I think we live in a culture where we don't talk a lot about that. We're always talking about living fully, which is one of my favorite subjects. But what happens when something ends? What happens indeed when life is over? And I want to talk about that very personally in the next few minutes because this happened to me in August. My second parent, my father, passed away August 21st. Now, my mom died in 2008. This is just when I was beginning really to apply yoga and Ayurveda to my life. And now in 2016, my beloved father passes, and I've had 8 years of practical spirituality, of really plugging in yoga and Ayurveda into my everyday life. And I want to tell you my experience of grief is very different in 2016 than it was in 2008. And I'm going to share some tips with you about grieving, and I'm going to share the story, a little bit of the story of my dad's passing. So stick around. Let's start with the story. My dad was 89. Many of you know I was very devoted to spending time with him, caring for him. He was my first teacher. We were really loved each other very much. He loved all of his kids. And he was a lover of life, and he had 89 amazing years. And it was his greatest concern that he would grow old and not be of any use anymore, and that he would dwindle in what he called drool and become useless to everybody. Well, that didn't happen because, luckily or not, in June he was diagnosed with bladder cancer. And that was just after I was there visiting with all of my children and grandchildren. And he felt well enough still to drive us to the airport. Now, what ritual has your parent done for you over the years? That was one of my dad's rituals. He was always there at the bottom of the stairs when you arrived at the airport, and he always insisted on driving you to the airport, even if it was 4 in the morning. In June, he did that. He drove a whole car of his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to the airport. And shortly after that, this diagnosis of bladder cancer, he then began to develop severe pain, and sure enough, the cancer had spread to his bones, and there was not much to be done. He had a very quick decline, and I was there for the last 6 days of his deathing. During that time, he was in 2 hospitals, and finally we got him to a hospice care center where he passed peacefully during the eclipse. Now, the first thing I want to tell you is that there is such a thing as a good death, and that's a topic that I'm going to be exploring in the new year. I was able to be part of planning a good death for both of my parents. I've also attended to other friends, and there's a lot of wonderful work going on in this realm of planning a good death. We'll talk about that another time. My dad had a good death. All of his children were there. Again, he passed during the eclipse, which we thought was pretty special, and things were very peaceful and prearranged for him. So it wasn't in and of itself a traumatic event, but of course it's, I guess, a traumatic experience to lose your second parent. Well, that word trauma I'm struggling a little bit with. Let's just say it's really significant. A lot of people have asked me if I feel like an orphan, and I've said no. And then I reflected on it and I thought, well, what is an orphan? So I looked it up. And the definition was someone without parents. And yes, by that definition, I am an orphan. I have no more earthly parents. The definition went on to describe someone without anyone to care for them, someone who is bereft of support. That is not me. I do not feel bereft of support. I have my family, I have my community, and I have my connection to something bigger than I am, which is what yoga and Ayurveda provide me with. Feeling like I'm part of the bigger cycles of nature, of the day, of the cosmos. I feel deeply connected. So no, I don't feel like an orphan. What I do feel is I do feel that I'm being asked to step up, that I am now an elder, and indeed I am the elder in my family, my siblings and I, that it's time now for me to bust it out with a level of responsibility and wisdom keeping that previously fell to my father. But as he is the elder in the next generation, the last one to pass, now it's my turn. So I feel a sense of responsibility, which actually I delight in, and also a sense of freedom that comes at this time of life. In addition, I also do feel sorrowful. I feel sorry that my dad died. I feel sorrowful in many ways, and I am grieving. And so I just want to give you a few tips about grieving. And again, this is a topic we'll go into later on in the new year. I want to flesh it out for you because don't you know somebody who has passed? Maybe you've had the tragedy. I have 2 friends who lost children this summer. Many of our parents are at that stage where they're passing or have passed. Many of our friends are dying. That's just the way it is. And not only that, grief is not confined to death of an individual. It also can come with retirement. It can come with empty nesting. Grief is anytime we lose something, we grieve. And so I'd like to get better at it, wouldn't you? So we'll talk more about that. But for now, here are some tips for you. First thing, and I've spoken to this, is do it. Embrace it. Lean into your grief. Lean into your sorrow. Don't avoid it, because what you avoid is just going to grow. So don't be afraid to grieve. Don't be afraid to feel that sense of loss. It's a natural part of living. And as you build your capacity to live, being able to grieve is part of it. So just do it. Do the Nike thing with grief. Embrace it. You can build your capacity through self-care. Particularly during a period of grief, make sure your self-care is strong and daily. Stick with your routine, your daily routines. And we talk a lot about that at Yoga, Wisdom, and Wellness. How to build a morning routine and an evening routine that will build capacity in you so that you have the container to hold whatever comes your way in life. Stay with those routines. Make sure you're getting exercise, even if it's just a gentle walk a day. When my dad was in the hospital, I would take 10, 15 minutes twice a day and go out and walk around the courtyard. See that tree, see that sky, feel that fresh air, and then I'd come back to the bedside. Food. Be sure to eat. Sometimes when we're in acute grief, we lose our appetite. Be sure to get something nourishing to eat. Soups come to mind. Something that's easy to digest. But be mindful of your food and make sure you are eating enough, or conversely, if your grief tosses you into comfort eating, be aware of that too. And get some support so you don't overeat and stuff yourself to numb yourself when you're grieving. Rest. You may need some sleep aids. You may need to use some herbs or some other ways to get you to sleep so that you make sure that you rest your brain and rest your mind during this time. Very important. And finally, on the list of self-care, pampering. I've had a lot of body work and a lot of energy work since my dad passed. I'm just kind of pulled the budgetary stops out and I'm being touched and cared for by others. So pamper yourselves. I'm also taking a lot of hot baths, bubble baths, essential oils, self-massage. Pamper, pamper, pamper. Why? That love is important. That self-love is so important to have the capacity to grieve in a healthy way. Next tip I want to have you remember to do is to spend time in contemplation. Maybe you have a meditation practice. Maybe you practice Yoga Nidra. Maybe your contemplation is a mindful walk in nature. Maybe you read poetry or scripture each day and you take the time for reflection. I'm going to really encourage you to journal while you're grieving, even if it's just a stream of consciousness. I've been doing morning pages. Just get that pen on that paper and let it come. So contemplation, very important to support healthy grieving. And finally, my favorite, community. Call to your community, lean into your community, call a friend. I've thrown myself a couple of parties since my dad passed to get people to come to me. I celebrated my birthday. I'm vlogging with all of you, and I look forward to your responses down below. Don't isolate yourself. Take time in contemplation so that you have that quiet time, but make sure that you're leaning in to the power and the support of your community. In fact, this is a really great time to volunteer so that you can get outside of your own experience and help others. So that's it. Those are my quick tips for grieving. Again, we'll go into this more another time, but embrace your grief. Take beautiful care of yourself. Spend time in contemplation, journaling, reading, meditating, walking, and lean into your community. And with all of that, your grief journey will open up your spiritual life in a whole nother way. And it'll connect you in ways that you can't imagine, honestly. Am I happy that my dad died? No. Do I feel like an orphan? No. I'm without parents. But indeed, I am connected. I am not without support. I'm forever held. And that's a result of me taking care of myself, building my capacity, and doing the simple practices that I teach to you, so that I guess I was ready. And I feel that I have the capacity to allow my grief to guide me into a deeper sense of self-knowing and a deeper sense of service to the world. So I hope this has been helpful. You're welcome to leave a comment down below. This is a big topic. Let's open it up. And based on your feedback, we'll go from here, and there'll be some more teaching around this idea of grief. All right. Thanks for watching. I'm always so grateful that you would spend your time with me. Until the next time, namaste.